He arrived with salt on his cloak and a claim no hearth could refuse. "Open your door, Una." The knock shook peat dust from the beam, and cold salt rode the air before dawn. Her son stirred in the cradle beside the fire. No man should have known her name at that hour, and none should have stood smiling through a storm. She held the iron latch but did not lift it. Outside, the wind dragged shingle across the shore with a dry scraping sound. The cottage smelled of peat smoke, wet wool, and the milk she had warmed for her child. Her fingers went numb on the metal. The knock came again, slow and certain. "Open, and I will speak plain. Keep me in the wind, and the sea will speak for me instead." Una looked at the cradle. The boy slept with one hand curled under his cheek, dark lashes on skin pale as shell. She had never named his father aloud. Women on the island had counted months, lowered their eyes, and let silence do its work. Yet the man outside knew. She lifted the latch. A tall stranger stepped in, bringing the sting of spray and the smell of kelp. His cloak shone dark with rain. Water ran from his hair to his jaw, but his face held no strain from the climb across the rocks. He looked once at Una, then at the child, and a strange softness crossed him like moonlight over black water. "That is my son," he said. The words struck harder than the wind. Una put her body between the stranger and the cradle. "You lie." "No." He reached into his cloak and drew out a purse of gold, dull in the firelight. "I am a man tonight, because the moon permits it. By day I swim as a seal in the cold water round Sule Skerry. You met me on Midsummer Eve where the tide pools shine between the rocks. You spoke with me till the fog closed. By dawn I had gone, and you thought it a dream you were too wise to repeat." The room shrank around her. She remembered the wet stone under her bare feet, the cry of birds above the cliff, the calm face of a man she had never seen before and never saw leave. She remembered how the sea had lain still for 1 hour, as if listening. The stranger set the purse on the table. "Call me no husband. I do not ask for your hearth. But the boy is of 2 shores. When he is 7 years old, I will come for him. I will give you silver and gold enough to fill your apron, and I will place a small gold chain around his neck so you may know him, if the sea lets you see him again." Una's knees weakened, but she stayed upright. "He is flesh from my flesh." The man's eyes did not harden. That hurt her more. "So he is. Yet the tide has rights older than ours. Keep him, feed him, sing over him, and love him. Count each year well." "I have counted already." He turned before she found a reply. When she opened the door after him, the yard stood empty under racing cloud. Only the sound of waves below the croft moved in the dark, patient as breathing. The years measured by tides. Una told no one what the stranger had said. On islands such as hers, people kept their fear close and their speech spare. They mended nets, cut peat, salted fish, and gave a troubled face the kindness of not asking. Still, old women watched the child with eyes that lingered too long when he laughed at the cry of seals offshore. Even before dawn, the child listened for a call no land mother could hear. She named him Marin. He grew strong in the arms and swift in the legs. Before he could speak clearly, he would crawl to the threshold whenever the tide turned. By 3, he knew the names of birds no one had taught him. By 5, he could sit for an hour on the headland, staring at the gray backs that rose and vanished beyond the foam. Once, in winter, Una found him barefoot on the frozen grass before dawn. The wind cut through her shawl like a knife. Marin stood facing the sea with his small hands spread, as if he were waiting for someone to lift him. She snatched him up, pressed him against her, and felt his skin cold as river stone. "Why did you go out?" she asked, carrying him inside. He leaned his head on her shoulder. "Something called." Children say many odd things, and mothers learn when to laugh. Una did not laugh. She wrapped his feet in wool and sat him by the fire. The smell of singed peat filled the room, and the kettle hissed. Her own hands would not stop shaking. In the 6th year, she took Marin inland to her aunt on a farm beyond the sea sight. The road ran through wet heather and brown hill grass. Sheep bells carried on the wind. Una told herself that distance could break any claim not spoken before witnesses. For a while, the change seemed to work. Marin slept through the night. His cheeks reddened in the hill air. He chased lambs, came home muddy, and laughed at the farm dog. Una felt hope creep back into her house like pale light under a door. Then spring arrived, and with it the sound of geese crossing north. Marin stopped in the yard and listened so hard that even the dog sat down. He turned toward the unseen sea. "Mother," he said, "why does my chest ache when I hear wings?" She knelt to tie the thong of his shoe, though it did not need tying. Her fingers moved to gain time. Some sounds wake old thoughts. But I have no old thoughts, he said. She looked up at him. Dust clung to his knees. A smear of milk lay above his lip. He was still a child, still hers in every way that could be held. Yet his eyes had gone far beyond the hill. That evening her aunt set oatcakes on the board and spoke in a low voice. The sea takes what is sea-born. My own first child was buried at 3 days old. I wrapped him with my own hands. A woman does not choose which grief enters by her door. She only chooses how she stands when it does. Una broke her oatcake and could not swallow. This was the way island people offered comfort. No soft clouds of speech, only a place set beside another wound. She reached across the table and covered her aunt's work-worn hand. No other words were needed. When the first summer storm beat the shutters, Maren sat up from sleep and called out to someone in a tongue Una did not know. By morning she had made her choice. Hiding him would only teach him fear before loss had even come. She took him home to the coast and watched the sea from then on as one watches a rival at market, never turning her back. The gold chain at Midwater. The 7th year came with hard bright days and long evenings. Every morning Una counted not the hours but the spaces between one tide and the next. Maren sensed the strain in her though she tried to hide it. He stayed close, carried kindling without being asked, and put his small hand in hers when they walked to gather limpets. On the black stones below the croft, the sea took back what it had marked. On the eve of his birthday, the sea lay flat, shining like hammered pewter. No bird cried, no oar struck water. The stillness pressed against the ear until it felt like sound. Una barred the door before sunset. She banked the fire high and set Maren on a stool near her knees. You do not go out tonight, she said. He searched her face. Is someone coming? She had hidden truth so long that it had grown sharp edges inside her. She drew a breath that tasted of smoke. Your father may come. Maren did not smile, as some children would. He only looked toward the shuttered window. Is he a fisherman? No. Is he a good man? Una closed her eyes for one beat. I do not know what word belongs to him. The knock came after moonrise. Maren flinched, then stood. Una pulled him behind her and opened the door only the width of her arm. The same man stood there, unchanged. No line marked his brow. No bend had entered his shoulders. His cloak dripped seawater onto the threshold. I have come as I said, he told her. You count years like a taxman, Una answered. A shadow of grief crossed his face. Do you think counting is painless in the water? For the first time, she saw not power but cost. The sight angered her because it stirred pity, and pity felt like betrayal. You speak of cost while you stand dry enough to speak. He looked past her at Maren. Will you come and see the shore with me, son? Maren stepped into view. His voice trembled but did not break. If I go, may I return? The man did not answer at once. The silence was answer enough. Una seized Maren by both shoulders. Her grip made him wince, and she loosened it at once. No, her voice cracked like a snapped mast rope. No tide, no moon, no old right can take him. The Selkie man reached into his cloak and drew out the promised chain. It was fine as grass stem, bright against his wet palm. He did not try to force his way in. He waited. Maren looked from one to the other. A child's face should not hold such divided longing. He loved the mother whose hands tied his shoes and cooled his fever. He longed for the unknown call that had troubled his sleep since infancy. The split in him stood plain as the firelight on his cheek. Then he made the choice no mother can make for her child. He stepped forward. Una caught his shirt. The coarse wool bunched in her fist. Maren. He pressed his face to her waist for one short moment, as he had done when thunder frightened him at 4. Through the cloth she felt his breath, hot and quick. Mother, he whispered, if I stay, the sound will never stop. That was the cruelest mercy. He was not being stolen. He was answering something inside himself. Her hands opened. On the shore below the croft, moonlight silvered the weed-black rocks. Seals lay there in a loose ring, heads lifted. The man bent and fastened the gold chain around Maren's neck. The child turned once and raised a hand. Una did not trust herself to wave, for waving can look too much like consent. The man removed his dark outer skin as if slipping free of one life to enter another. In the moon's pale wash, his human shape blurred, narrowed, and dropped to the stones as a great seal marked with white around the neck. Beside him another smaller seal turned, and for one instant Una knew her son by the chain's brief gleam. They slid into the water. She ran along the edge till the shingle cut her feet through her shoes. She called Marin's name until her voice tore. The sea kept its own counsel. Only once did a smooth head rise beyond the surf, dark eyes on her, before it vanished toward the north where Sule Skerry lay like a knife in the ocean mist. At dawn the purse of gold still sat on her table. Una carried it to the cliff and hurled it into the waves. Coins flashed once, then were gone. Her hands felt lighter. Her house did not. A hearth built against memory years past. On small islands, sorrow does not leave. It learns the paths between house, kirk, and shore. Una worked through it because work is what keeps bread in a chest and wool on a childless bed. She spun flax, helped with lambing, and kept her face steady when neighbors spoke of weather, fish, and marriages. In the salt-stained hall, the proof she dreaded lay quiet at last. A widower named Magnus began to call at her cottage with fair reasons. He brought driftwood fit for carving spoons. He mended a broken hinge. He left half a sack of barley after a poor harvest and said only that he had more than he needed. He had one daughter already grown and married on another isle, and his house stood sound against the east wind. When he asked for Una's hand, he did it before her kin and his own, with no flourish and no sweet speech. "I can offer a warm roof and honest work," he said. "I will not trouble old sorrow, but I will stand beside it if it rises." She said yes because loneliness can become its own weather, and because Magnus asked for nothing she could not give. He did not pry at the silence around Marin. When she woke from dreams and sat breathing hard in the dark, he laid another blanket over her shoulders and let the night settle. For a time, peace came in plain forms. The smell of broth, the scrape of Magnus's knife shaping a peg, clean straw on the floor, a roof that did not leak by the bed. Una found she could smile without feeling disloyal to grief. That discovery frightened her at first, then eased her. One autumn, Magnus took service on a laird's boat bound north for trade and hunting. The sea looked calm that morning, iron gray under a pale sky. Una wrapped oat bread in cloth for him and tightened the clasp on his heavy cloak. They spoke little. Island people put care into useful acts. He touched her shoulder before he stepped away. "I will be home before the geese turn south." She watched the boat shrink to a dark stitch on the water. An old ache woke in her chest, cold and exact. She nearly called him back for no reason she could name. Days later, a change came over the village. Men stood in knots and stopped speaking when women passed. Dogs barked at odd hours. One dusk a boat scraped into the inlet with too few oars pulling. Rain needled the harbor, and the smell of brine and tar stung the air. Una went down with the others. Magnus was not among the living who stepped ashore. A fisherman named Eric faced her with his cap in both hands. His lips were blue from cold. "There was fog near Sule Skerry," he said. "Then seals all about us, more than I have seen in one place." They rose close, not fearful. The laird fired his gun for sport. He shot a large gray seal and a smaller one beside it, both marked with a glint at the neck. Before the hour had turned, the swell struck us broadside. The mast split. Your husband was thrown and taken under. We found his body at dawn. The shore tilted under Una's feet. She heard the rest as if through wool. Someone guided her to a rock. Someone covered her head from the rain. None of it reached the place where the words had landed. A glint at the neck. That night the dead were laid in order for washing. Magnus rested under a linen cloth, his face slack with salt. Beside him the hunters had placed the skins they had taken before the wreck, proof for the laird's hall. One was large and gray. One was smaller. Una knew before she touched them. Her hand shook against the slick hide of the little one. Around the neck, caught in the fur, lay a strand of gold. Not bright now. Dim, tangled, cruelly plain. No cry came from her at first. Grief can strike so hard it empties the lungs. She sank to her knees on the packed earth floor. The room smelled of wet wool, tallow, and the iron tang of sea water drying. Women around her lowered their heads. No one tried to move her. At last sound returned. It came not as a scream but as Marin's name, spoken once, low and broken, as if she feared to startle him from sleep. She bent over the small skin and laid both hands on it. There was no child to warm, no hair to smooth, no face to kiss. Only hide, salt, and a chain no longer circling a living throat. Magnus lay near him, lost through another man's vanity and the sea's swift answer. Husband and son had come together into death, one by choice, one by chance, if chance exists where old claims move. At dawn Una asked for the 2 seal skins in Magnus's body. The laird complained at the loss of fine pelts, but the village stood with her in silence until his clerk looked away. Men lifted what she asked them to lift. Women brought clean cloth. No one spoke against it. They buried Magnus in consecrated ground beside his kin. Una placed his carved spoon in the earth with him. Then, on the same gray day, she walked to a cliff path above the northern water carrying the smaller skin folded in her arms. Her aunt, bent now with age, walked beside her without a word. At the edge, where wind tore tears dry before they could fall, Una unwound the gold chain and held it in her palm. It had cut no flesh. It had marked a belonging she had never been able to alter. She kissed her closed hand, not the chain, and cast it into the sea. Then she gave the small skin to the waves. Below, the water opened and drew it under. For one breath she thought she saw two seals turn in the foam, one large, one small, moving side by side toward the Skerry. She did not call after them. Some names must be carried in the chest because the mouth can do nothing with them. When she reached home by dusk, the peat fire had sunk low. She knelt, fed it, and watched the flame take hold again. That was all she could do, and it was still a kind of faith. The sea beyond the window. Winter closed around the island. Ice formed in the water bucket on the coldest mornings. Smoke lay flat over the crofts. Una moved through her tasks with the care of one carrying a full bowl over rough ground. She had buried a husband and yielded a son to a grave no priest could bless. Each sorrow had its own weight. Together they altered the shape of every room. She could not call them hers, yet she did not turn away. Yet the world did not stop. Neighbors still needed hands at calving. Nets still tore. Children still lost mittens in the snow grass. One evening Magnus's married daughter crossed from her aisle with a bundle on her hip and asked, shy as a girl, whether Una would sit by the hearth while the baby slept. Una took the child and felt his warm heaviness settle against her arm. Her throat tightened, but she did not pull away. The baby smelled of milk and lanolin. His fingers opened and closed on the edge of her sleeve. Outside, the sea beat the rocks below the village in its old tireless measure. Una stood by the small window and looked toward the dark north, where no Skerry could be seen in winter light. She no longer asked whether Marin had loved her enough, or whether she had failed by opening her hands that moonlit night. Love had never been the question. Keeping had been the question, and no mother, however fierce, can hold shut the door between a child and what he is. So she rocked the sleeping baby while the peat gave off its bittersweet smell, and when the wind rose she did not hear it as a threat alone. She heard distance, memory, and the sound of a world larger than any one hearth. Her grief stayed, it would stay, but it had changed from a knife into a stone she could carry. On clear nights after that, seals sometimes surfaced beyond the harbor wall. Villagers pointed and counted them by lantern light. Una never joined the counting. She only stood still and watched the dark heads lift from black water, then sink again without trace.